Sheri, welcome to Diaspora Food Stories. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about the podcast.
Awesome. And you're joining us from Waco, Texas.
Yes, Waco, Texas, where we're about to get some snow, maybe.
It's been that type of a winter, definitely. Well, I'm excited. We've known each other for a long time and watched each other's work. And thank you for just being such a big supporter of Cuisine Noir and the work that we're doing. So very happy to be able to support you and the work that you're doing and sharing that with our audience today.
Well, thank you so much, and I do appreciate your support as well. And
Wonderful.
it's been good to see the progression.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's get started. We've got a lot to talk about, but definitely I'm excited to really dig also into the conversation of Creole because I know that is an area that's near and dear to the work that you're doing as well. But let's get started in letting our audience know a little bit about who you are. And so let's take it back to Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Okay. Well, Lake Charles, Louisiana is my hometown. My neither of my parents were from there, but they relocated there.
Okay.
My father's family was from the St. Martinville, New Iberia area,
Mm.
and my mother's family, excuse me, was from Vermilion Parish. But due to some life circumstances, she grew up in Port Arthur, Texas,
Mm.
and they met through my father's mutual friend who happened to be my mother's first cousin. And so that they she did relocate to Lake Charles, and so I was born there, grew up there, went to um, school at Sacred Heart. My family, most of my dad's family was Catholic. My mother's family was Protestant. So I
Okay.
had dual dual experiences there. And then even though Lake Charles was desegregated at that time, they still had zoning areas. So I ended up going to W.O. Boston High School,
Mhm.
which was founded by William Oscar Boston, and he was a educator extraordinaire. Did some work in Port Arthur as well with school districts. So I wouldn't trade that experience for anything, and we still have a very thriving alumni to date.
Mhm.
And so I grew up there, and then went on to Northwestern State University in Natchitoches.
Okay. And so growing up, when you think about Louisiana, for so many of us, the first thing that comes to mind is food, right? So
Yes.
and that's eventually where your work started and is today. So as a child, tell us about how food, those early food memories.
Well, because my parents were a little older,
Hmm.
I ended up staying with my paternal grandmother a lot. Didn't know my other grandparents, they were already deceased, but I stayed with her, and she just lived the next street over from us. So it wasn't far, right?
Hmm.
And she was an excellent cook. She didn't mind me assisting her, so to speak, in the kitchen. She would put a little crate or box up next to the stove or sink so I could be right there with her.
Hmm.
Um, she had a small garden, and there was a fig tree next door. So I learned how to pick figs, snap beans, do all those types of things, and mainly be her little assistant. And my mother was an excellent cook in her own right,
Hmm.
but my interest in food and how things work, and the different types of things she did. She would make a lot of tinctures and tonics, and that was real interesting to me as a kid. They tasted awful, but but she had her own way of doing things, and so I think that was the beginning of
Hmm.
my falling in love with food. And when I was about 9 or 10, my mother had to have a major surgery.
Okay.
And I decided that she didn't need that hospital food for Easter. It was during Easter. So I had watched her make a roast in the browning bag, and some people will remember that. I'm dating myself with that, but I understand they're having a comeback. And so I made that dinner, and my dad and I took it to the hospital to her. So that was my first solo.
Wow. How did it come out?
It came out well because the browning bag is very forgiving, you know. It's very helpful. You don't have to turn it, you don't have to do anything to it. And then I just began to help my mom cook. She was always cooking for the church or for
Mhm.
someone else, and I began to work with her in the kitchen.
Wonderful. So then as you're beginning, you graduate from high school and you're beginning your collegiate career and eventually your career, how was food in that mix and leading into the journey of the work that you started doing?
Well, when I was in high school, I started cooking for other people and doing things. I had a little summer store where I would sell things.
Wow.
And then when I became one of my friends, his mother was a caterer, and I used to help. Her name was Willie Mae Ryan, and I used to help her. And the women of New Sunlight were always cooking, so I had that jump start. And but when I went to Northwestern, I declared a business major,
Okay.
and I wanted to go into business. Well, after accounting kind of knocked me down a
Mhm.
little pegs. I decided this is boring. I don't want to do this. And I
Mhm.
changed my major to food and nutrition. At that time, it was food and nutrition.
Okay.
Um, and so then, that became my passion.
Right.
And so I was relatively comfortable with that. I love science. So the food science part came naturally.
Mhm.
And that's how I ended up in that major in the hospitality field.
Now, around that time, though, would you say what was sort of the food careers around that? What were you hearing? What was going on in terms
Oh,
of the prospect of being in a food career?
at that time, our main focus for career pathways were hotel,
Hmm.
restaurant management.
Hmm.
Um, they were focused a lot on hospital, getting your being a registered dietitian, because
Okay.
that degree plan did allow for that.
Hmm.
But so those were the primary pathways.
Okay.
It was a little bit of tourism, but that hadn't taken off like it did after I
Hmm.
graduated.
Hmm.
The cruise ships and all those types of opportunities to work overseas were not, you know, presented to us.
Gotcha. And the, and the
And
and the idea of being a chef.
the idea of being a chef was not a primary focus of that major. It
Hmm.
was more on the clinical side. They focused a lot on nutrition.
Hmm.
Actually, I was taking classes with pre-med students
Okay.
because I ended up with, you know, 23 hours of chemistry and all of that. So it was heavily focused on the science. They
Gotcha.
did also focus on education, but not from working in food and education, but teaching
Hmm. Hmm.
from that standpoint. So,
Okay. Now, did you stay in Louisiana after college?
no, I didn't. I really wanted to move to Texas.
Yeah.
And my first place was, I wanted to move to Florida. That was the first thing. And then New York. And then I ended up moving to Texas.
Mhm.
And I started out in healthcare because
Okay.
those jobs were more readily available in
Mhm.
the Houston area. Um, the hotel scene was coming, into more, like I said, the tourism aspect, but there weren't that many opportunities in management, and you had to,
Okay.
pick and choose, and you know, some of the positions were going to be very low paying positions. And that was just the way hotel was at that time. Um, so I went into healthcare. I worked in the hospital in dietary services,
Mm-hmm.
and actually it was a neat experience because our healthcare organization was doing some pilot work with NASA
Okay.
on developing food pouches.
Mm-hmm.
And so that food science part came into play. And so I was able to experience that at
Yeah.
that location.
Okay. Now, did you, at this point, I don't know if it was on your radar of the foods that you were serving, or maybe you were taught were more nutritious and this and that. From a
Hmm.
cultural standpoint, were you seeing that they were leaning maybe toward certain types of foods, less toward more foods you see in multicultural communities? Was that ever anything that came on your radar?
No, not even in Houston. They didn't offer, like later in healthcare, they
Mm-hmm.
began to focus on multi ethnic and multicultural cuisines,
Mm-hmm.
offering those as menu options. But it was pretty straightforward cafeteria, I would say cafeteria style food, even for the
Mm-hmm.
patients.
Okay. Okay.
And we did, when I worked there, I worked in OB-GYN and in obstetrics and gynecology. They did focus on the moms
Okay.
a little bit more so they could order a steak. We had
Mhm.
steak and lobster. We had surf and turf. We had a
Mhm.
grill in our particular kitchen. But
Okay.
the rest of the food options on the menu, no.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So then when would you say in your life things started to take that turn of, your work around, and let's talk a little bit about gifts from the ancestors and really
Okay.
starting to dig into Creole, your Creole heritage and Creole cuisine, etc.
Okay. Well, actually, when I start, my cousin who was doing a lot of the genealogy research,
Okay.
who lived in Washington, D.C., Teresa, she introduced me to the genealogy. And that was in the, I would say, the late 80s. And so I became very interested in family information and genealogy. She was
Mhm.
interested in getting recipes that
Mm.
my grandmother and her sisters used to prepare.
Mhm.
And so that's how that dialogue started. When I left Houston, I moved to Dallas. I worked in healthcare briefly, but
Mhm.
then I started working for Dallas Independent School District. So I
Mhm.
was in school nutrition, and that's the bulk of my career was in school food
Gotcha.
service.
Mhm.
So that was where I started to see the ethnic options
Mhm.
and like presented on those menus, and we were real intentional about being inclusive with the student population that we were serving because most kids eat with their eyes. So if it's foreign to them and they look at it and they go, what is that,
Mhm.
you missed the mark.
Mhm. Mhm.
So um, being in that environment in school food service and with the American School Food Service Association, you had a lot of exposure
Okay.
to other cultures and other cuisines.
Okay. So then as you're doing this genealogy, where did Creole start to come into play? And then you started to really dig deep into that, which inspired your cookbooks.
Okay. Well, yes, I at that point in my um, I guess it was 95, I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, which a lot of people don't know, but
Okay.
I moved there. I was the assistant director of the school food service there. And there was a gentleman there that I met through his wife. She was one of the principals that I would service, and he had um, a business called Chef Ramo's Cooking School there.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
was from Lake Charles. We
Okay.
used to talk a lot about Creole food, and I began to cultivate a relationship with him. And then at the same time, my cousin was saying, you ought to merge the genealogy and the food. because I had
Mm.
begun working on a cookbook and
Okay.
trying to gather recipes and
But
get
what
the
was the
rest.
genealogy showing you? Oh, telling you guys.
Well, the genealogies, in the beginning, I was just focused on my direct ancestors.
Okay.
But as I delved more into it, and you mentioned the gifts from the ancestors, is when I did my ancestry
Mm-hmm.
test, and then I did the African ancestry
Okay.
test, and
Mm-hmm.
with Gina's group. And so Dr. Gina Page. And
Mm-hmm.
so I began to want to know, well, why did they use these particular ingredients? What influenced that? And
Okay.
then I began to find out, the West African influences, the
Mm-hmm.
Native American influences in the area where they were in Southwest Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
The influences of those coming from the Caribbean
Mm-hmm.
and from Spain. Um, and we had all of those influences in Louisiana because of the Louisiana Purchase.
Right.
But so that's when I started doing a lot of research on the food ways itself and
Mm-hmm.
the ingredients and why did they use certain things. Why was okra so prominent in
Right.
a lot of dishes?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I guess what I also want to get into was when you did all of this, one, what did it reveal? And then two, and as you were growing up, were there talks of Creole in your family? So again, where did you discover the Creole in your family and really start to dig into that piece?
Okay. Yes. Well, all of my dad's family were from, like I said, St. Martin Parish, Iberia Parish. Most of his my grandmother did not speak English when I
Okay.
was growing up. She spoke Kouri, which is the Creole language of that area.
Okay.
Also, did her sisters, her brother who lived just up the road. They were always speaking it, always talking about, how they grew up.
Is that more of a
And
French dialect or?
it is yes, it's a Creole. It's very akin as I have studied it. I don't speak it fluently at all because my dad did not allow me to speak Creole growing up because he said when he moved from New Iberia to Lake Charles that they were scolded for
Yeah.
speaking it
Mhm.
in school. And he did not want me to have an accent, which I didn't
That's so
develop.
common. That's so
Yes,
common.
very common. I've
Mhm.
heard my Hispanic friends say the same thing about speaking
Absolutely.
Spanish.
That's how languages die.
Yes, and it is having a resurgence now. So I'm glad the University of Louisiana at Lafayette is doing work with it, Tele Louisiana, and
Mm.
the Creole Center at Northwestern is also doing some work with that. But I was just really interested in, why they had the customs and traditions that they did, and a
Mhm.
lot of that was tied to the language, tied to the food. And let's say, for example, with Lent,
Mhm.
and Lent is heavily observed there. On Thursday, my grandmother would make gumbos of herbs, which is
Mhm.
green gumbo,
Mhm.
because you couldn't eat meat. And, she would have that ready for Good Friday, and they would do a
Mhm.
big fish fry. Well, when I started looking at other Creole uh, communities and cultures from other parts of the diaspora,
Mhm.
they were doing the same thing. So I said, this is deeper than just the Creole
Mm.
in the United States. And so that opened up a whole new vision for me with the foodways. But my mother's family also has a Creole heritage, but
Mhm.
it is from um, the Acadians,
Okay.
which they were exiled from Nova Scotia Some of them came down there, and that's where you get the Cajun
Mhm.
influence.
Mhm.
And she never wanted to be Creole. She always, discounted that and fussed at my grandmother for speaking in French and stuff. But
So her mother spoke in French, or you're talking about your dad's mother?
my dad's mother.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sure her mother did too, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, because of the age she was when her mother passed, she
Mhm.
never got to experience that
Okay.
cultural dynamic with her parents. Her
Okay.
parents passed away when her mother at when she was 7, her father when she was 5.
Oh, wow.
So, and the people that raised her did not speak Creole to
Okay.
one another. In
Okay.
fact, I just did a piece on my newsletter in January of a Creole family from Port Arthur who had moved to Port Arthur,
Mhm.
and we had that same discussion that they were taught not to speak it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so you lose, like you say, you lose the language. And with the loss of the language, you lose some of the customs
Absolutely.
and all of that. But so I always knew we had a Creole heritage.
Mhm.
And a lot of people you know, think when you say Creole that it has something to do with colorism and all of that, but it is totally not that. It is strictly a culture, a language, and then the cuisine itself
Mhm.
comes out of that.
Yes, absolutely. And I love how you say that because we know, Creole and the Caribbean, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're excited to be teaming up with Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean, and they're doing their Creole festival for the first time in
Mm-hmm.
May. And they talk about the influences that are all into that, from the African and the Asian and China and all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important to, like you said, it's not a racial thing, but it's just how communities have come together through various instances to form, like you said, a language and customs and foods like that. So talking about the food, let's talk about some of the ingredients to your family, ingredients and the customs that were passed down through those Creole heritage.
Well, like I mentioned the okra. The
Hmm.
other thing, of course, is the use of cayenne, where
Okay.
in West African cuisine and Caribbean cuisine, they use Scotch bonnet and other peppers for the heat. Um, in that particular um, geographic location, St. Martinville, New Iberia, that is the birthplace of Tabasco. And
Mm.
those cayenne peppers were cultivated on that island and cultivated, by our ancestors who were taking care of the plants. There were also salt mines there, so a lot of your Creole seasoning is very specific to that area. The ingredients that they put in it, the
Mhm.
garlic, the paprika, the
Mhm.
cayenne, the thyme is all relative to what they were growing at that time.
Mhm.
And so that's a principal thing in the foodways. And then also the use of certain raw seasonings like
Okay.
celery, onions, and bell pepper, which
Mhm.
there's controversy about using the Trinity. So some people,
What's the controversy? I don't think I've heard that.
oh, well, some people say you shouldn't say it, especially if you're traditional Catholic, you shouldn't
Oh.
compare it to,
Oh,
the,
so the name, huh? Issue with the
yes, yes.
name. Gotcha.
But a lot of people call it that. Some people use bell pepper, onion, and celery. Some
Mhm.
people add green onion into it.
Mhm.
Um, when I was growing up, my mom was never a big bell pepper person other than
Okay.
stuffed bell peppers,
Okay.
but she didn't like using it in certain dishes. And I agree with that line of thought. She didn't probably know why she didn't like it, but if you put bell pepper in gumbo, for example,
Mhm.
sometimes it has an off-putting taste
Okay.
because the bell pepper can get a little acidic
Okay.
and then it makes it bitter.
Gotcha.
And so but using those ingredients when you look at the sauces, Creole,
Mhm.
that's how you distinguish Creole and Cajun cuisine. Cajun cuisine is more rustic, more boils, more um, one pot dishes similar to the Gullah Geechee, low
Mhm.
country.
Mhm.
And when you look at the Creole cuisine, that's where you get your Creole sauce, which is very akin to West African tomato stew.
Uh-huh, nice.
Very, very similar. And then you have your etouffees, your
Mhm.
roux-based sauces,
Mhm.
which has that French influence of the five mother sauces.
Okay.
Having that, um, the fat to flour ratio and creating the
Mhm.
sauce that way. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's distinctive in that regard, the
Mhm.
flavor profiles. But honestly, Cherie, when I was doing the work, when I really started doing West African research was when I moved here to Waco.
Okay.
The dean of the continuing ed wanted to do a West African influence class.
Okay.
And I told her, I said, well, I'm not a West African expert on cooking that food, but I'll do some research and I'll try my best to help you create the curriculum.
Mhm.
And thanks be to God for Chef Pierre Thiem
Okay.
and for Azaz Soka and Nampumaledo Makweba, because they were my go-to people and they helped me do that. And in doing so, I said, well, it's not just West African influences in Creole food, but in Southern food
Mhm.
as a
Mhm.
whole.
So it's, looking at the food ways, just the connection of when
Hmm.
you really look at it and study it. There's just everything connected. And I love what you said. It was like a moment when you said Gullah Geechee and Cajun and just the living off of the land and
Hmm.
all of that, right?
Yes,
So,
the wild game, the fishing, trapping,
mhm,
all of
mhm,
that. But that's where we get our crawfish boils from
right,
in Louisiana. And then you go into other cultures and they have different boils
right,
that they
right.
do, especially in the coastal pathways
Mhm,
where you
mhm.
have seafood. Um, when I went to St. Lucia, I was privileged to go to a eco resort and
Okay.
take a cooking class there.
Mhm.
The person I worked with, her father was from Madagascar, her mother was
Mm.
East Indian, and we had a good dialogue. And so their Creole culture is a little bit different,
Mhm, mhm.
but the some of the flavor profiles are very similar, you know.
Wow, wow. So let's get into Cast Iron Skillet Culinaire. Talk about that.
Oh, well, let's see. Cast Iron Skillet Culinaire was part of my food demo
Okay,
company. I
okay.
was working with another chef in Houston. I was also working at one of the grocers doing their cooking connections part
Mhm,
time.
mhm.
At that time, I was in the classroom. By then, I had left school food service and went into the classroom, and that was my culinary pivot, I think,
Okay.
because I was teaching culinary arts on a high
Mhm,
school level,
mhm.
and the students were helping me a lot with my recipes, and I would give them projects. And the chef that I was working with, we began doing events,
Mhm.
small events, small group events, dinners, food and wine tasting. We were doing it at the store. And so that's Cast Iron Skillet Culinaire was born out of that. I wanted to name it just Cast Iron Skillet,
Mhm.
but one of the hotels had a restaurant named
Okay,
that.
okay.
And so I had to add something to it.
There were no lawsuits. I get it.
Right. So
Cease
one of
and
my
desist. I hear you.
yeah, one of my chef friends, he said, just add Culinaire at the end and it'll be
Mhm.
fine. And so I did, and they accepted that. So I started my LLC and I began doing cooking demonstrations and food and wine events.
Okay.
And I continued that from Houston to here. When I moved here to Waco in 2013,
Okay.
I continued that, and I was working out in conjunction with a store here
Mhm.
that did cooking classes because we're small. We don't have a Sur La Table or
Mhm.
Williams
Right.
Sonoma or Central Market to have big cooking classes, but
Mhm.
she had a lot of customers, and so that was really great. And then, but unfortunately, the store ended up closing
Mhm.
due to economics, and that's how I started teaching at the community college and did the West African class, and that's where Gifts from the Ancestors was born.
Okay, so I
Was
love how your career, I'm sure you're seeing this, it's you see it, you're seeing one thing that you're looking to do, the job, right? And
hmm
then all of these other doors are opening or just other paths are coming along, right? It's almost like
yes,
life, right? You think
yeah.
you want it to be straight, do this, but along the way you're learning, things are happening, other doors are
hmm
opening, doors are closing, and you're seeing, I mean, who did you think when you started this career, one, you'd be where you're at today? And two, you be folding in who you are and who your family is into the work that you're doing.
Yeah, if it was up to me, I probably, if I, looking back, I probably would have retired from, being a food service director or something
Mhm,
like that
mm,
with the
mhm.
school district and kept that path. The only other path that I added to that was teaching. And I
Mhm.
was teaching on a collegiate level. So
Okay.
most every city I worked in, I did do some type of teaching.
Mhm.
And I had a good friend of mine. She said, you ought to look into, they need some culinary teachers. And that's how I parlayed, pivoted my career into that and began teaching high school. And then my students started to compete in Pro
Okay.
Start, and that opened up another world because then I'm going to these culinary schools, I'm going
Right.
to their educator
Mhm.
workshops, and I'm meeting all these chefs, and so that opened up, and I was excited about that because
Mhm.
it takes it from, I was a big fan of the uh the chef competition
Right,
shows.
right.
But of course it's nothing like that, right? That's not the real world,
But and
but
then again, infusing being able to put who you are into your work. How important was that? Because we know, especially nowadays, a lot before in the day, the chefs were so focused on whether it was French inspired cuisine or whatever the cuisine is,
hmm
and who they are personally was never infused into any of the food for a long time that they were cooking. And so now
yeah.
you're doing that and being able to um, bring who you are personally into it. And hopefully you taught your students to do that as well.
Yeah, well, I would say it really, the genesis was from working with the students because I had a very diverse group of students there who did not see people like themselves
Mhm.
in hotel restaurant management or anything of that nature. And so when I went into that classroom setting, I said, okay, I don't want them to just see me. I want them to see other chefs.
Mhm.
I invited my director of career and technology was very open to that. She was new. We wanted some to set up some advisors
Mhm.
to come on board and to be part of the career and technology education. And so that allowed me to enter into different worlds and you know um especially with the Mexican cuisine.
Mhm.
I had students that would come to me. I was just thinking about it the other day when I was watching a competition show. It's not something I watched, but I was somewhere and they had it on,
Mhm.
and they were doing Brazil. So I
Mhm.
had a lot of foreign exchange students, Italy, Vietnam,
Right.
uh, and I had one from Brazil.
Okay.
During that time, a Brazilian delegation, who would have thought, came to visit our superintendent. And so he said, well, I want your students to do lunch. I said, oh, well, I have a student from Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So with her and the other uh, students, we recreated a Brazilian fusion meal for them. And so they
Nice.
were just so excited, and we were excited about the
Nice.
reception. So that gave me the confidence, I think, to explore. You know,
Wonderful.
I've always been a nosy child. So,
Yeah, curiosity helps. It definitely
yes,
does. Um,
yes.
let's get into your books. The first one being Okra and Tomatoes, and then I
Hmm.
have your other one is Creole Celebrations.
Yes. Well, when I did Gifts from the Ancestors, I decided to trademark that name. And my niece, who is a paralegal, who also has food business, she helped me to do that. And so I got a cookbook coach, and I'm saying that to encourage others who want to do cookbooks and may not be able to get an agent or publisher, that it takes a lot of groundwork, but you can do it. And so I had a coach, and then I had an editor working with me. And their recommendation was to break the book up into smaller, uh, do a series versus trying to do a big book. And that's how Okra and Tomatoes came about. So I
Okay,
took excerpts out of the original book, which was Creole Table,
gotcha.
and just focused on those ingredients. And I was fortunate enough to participate in Southern Foodways Alliance workshop during COVID,
Hmm.
and we had an online workshop. And so, with the feedback from those editors, that's how I developed Okra and Tomatoes as a PDF
Okay.
and a downloadable cookbook. And then I just continued to work on. I said, well, I would like to focus on the celebrations, because in Creole cultures, celebrations are everything.
Hmm.
From the brand new baby, the christening, to the graduation, to the repast. If
Hmm.
someone passes away, it's all relative. And then, of course, Juneteenth
Hmm.
here in Texas is a big cultural celebration. It's not Creole inspired, but a lot of Creole people who are in Texas celebrated it. And that's how I began celebrating it. And I was fortunate and blessed enough to get a grant from Texas Food and Wine Alliance. And
Hmm.
that is how the hard copy of the book came
Nice.
about. So I strictly focused on celebrations, and celebrations that cross over from the African diaspora
Hmm.
to African American and Louisiana and Texas. So that's the nuts and bolts of the book.
Wonderful. And so, in terms of the recipes, those were just inspired by obviously growing up recipes that your grandmother and you made in the kitchen, and then you just learned to make along the way.
Yes, some of them are, some of them I included other um, uh, recipes from other cooks from Louisiana. For example, the women at New Sunlight had a cookbook.
Hmm.
So when I first started getting research from the recipe standpoint, just the Creole recipes, they
Hmm.
mailed in recipes to me, and I still have their handwritten
Mm,
recipes that
wow.
they sent to me. So I would make those, and make sure the ratios were correct.
Hmm.
So that's why in that book I talk about those influences from the women and men, because one of them is a man, who my best friend's father, who taught me how to cook some things. And so from that standpoint, that's where those recipes came from. Now, I'm not a baker, I have to
Okay.
confess.
Okay. Okay.
I make good pie crusts and things like that. So a lot of the baking stemmed from my mother's recipes, some of the women from New Sunlight, and my daughter, who's a pastry chef.
Hmm.
And so Amaya. So that's how I got those in there. But I did it from menu driven. So that recipe, though, that book is menu driven.
Gotcha.
And so when you look at Mardi Gras, which is coming up,
Hmm.
you see the food items that are specific to that time of year and that celebration.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so your work also inspired a scholarship in honor of your parents. And so let's talk
Yes.
about how that all came about, that whole idea, and then even getting it established.
Okay. Well, I always wanted to do it. I'm a big PBS fan. And
Okay.
you know how when they say at the end who sponsored the
Yes.
show and all that.
Hmm.
And I always wanted to do something to honor my parents. Initially, I was looking for a nonprofit scholarship agency to help facilitate that.
Okay.
But in 2025, I was invited to the Creole Heritage Center at Northwestern through a grant they had, and it was Creole Heritage Month, which is
Hmm.
October. And after working with the professors there and the students in the hospitality program, I just felt drawn that they needed it more than
Mm.
me trying to do a broad spectrum, across state lines and all of that. And so I began to meet with the alumni
Hmm.
foundation and it found out how to establish the scholarship. And so right now I'm trying to get it endowed by December
Okay.
and hopefully. And so there's two levels of endowment. And so I'm striving for the top level, which is 20,000, but
And what
there's
does that mean? If you can share endowed, I mean, is that another word for funded, or what is that?
yes, when you endow the scholarship, then it'll be ongoing, and it won't be a one and done. It will
Gotcha.
continue on. The lower level of endowment is more controlled by the university. If you
Hmm.
get a higher level of endowment, then you can have more input in it as the sponsor of the scholarship. So,
Got you. And it is in hospitality, so it's the
it's
Lawrence.
for hospitality students there at Northwestern State University in Louisiana.
Mhm.
Um, I'm encouraging more of the young women to apply because they are really struggling in hospitality and still pretty much underrepresented, despite
Mhm.
some of the other things we hear.
Right.
And
Or C.
I I
Mhm.
want them to be supported and feel confident that they can get through their studies and maybe go on to do studies abroad.
Right.
And so, I'm being flexible with how those funds will assist them. And we do have a grade point average, but I'm not making it so high that someone with the 2.0 can't apply, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And so that's we're really excited about that. And I'm doing a campaign this year. If 2000, I'll be turning 66, so I'll tell the
Okay.
whole audience. And that's where the $66 came from. But if
Okay.
I get 2000 and 26 people
Mhm.
to pledge $66,
Mhm.
we'll exceed the endowment by December.
Wonderful.
We really
Wonderful.
would.
And
Yeah.
how are they giving those donations? Where can they make that donation?
They make the donations online. It's the Lawrence J. and Viola M. Raleigh Hospitality Scholarship. When you type that in at NSULA
Mhm.
and you just type that in, it should come up and take you directly. It's on all of my social media, my
Wonderful.
Instagram, all of that. It's on my website. And so I just I put it on the e-blast, the
Mhm.
newsletters, all of that.
Okay.
And so it's very easy to access. Now they've adjusted it where they can give a small amount per month if
Okay.
they would prefer to do that,
Mhm.
or a one time,
Mhm.
or, there's various ways they can do it. You can do it through um, PayPal or credit card, and they even let you mail in. So,
Wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful. And then, so it is called 66 in 2026.
6, yes,
And your
yes.
goal is to have 2026 donors by December 26, 2026. So
Yes.
I see it. I see it going
Yes.
on there.
so we can
Wonderful.
get this thing endowed. And and I did mention with Creole Celebrations, I had another partner besides my. It really was a happenstance partnership,
Mhm.
but GO3, which Jubilee Distilling, which
Okay.
uh, makes GO3 vodka, which is a sweet potato
Okay.
vodka.
Mhm.
They curated all the cocktails in the cookbook for me.
Nice.
And so that was a good collaboration. And we did that for Juneteenth
Okay.
in 2023. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, lots of great things kicking off this year. Very excited. So definitely you can count on us for a donation to support as well. And
Yes.
then, definitely you're just hoping that everything works out. We got a year. It seems like it's far, but
It seems like it's far,
but
but it,
still,
yeah.
the way this
Yeah.
month is going already. And then lastly, let's talk about your Substack because I know you share some things on your Substack. So that's another way that people can learn
Hmm.
about what you're doing on there.
Okay. Yeah. The Substack focuses more on Creole heritage
Okay.
of people who live in Texas.
Okay.
When I was talking with another editor, at the time I was working on the cookbook, he said, "Well, you ever thought about doing Lone Star Creoles?" I said, "I can't do that right now. It's too much in my brain, you know."
Right.
But I did write it down. I did keep it in mind. And so I said, well, the easier way I think would be to do a newsletter.
Mhm.
First, get the stories of my family out, my father's side, my mother's side, how they migrated to um, Texas,
Mhm.
and then use the newsletter to get other people to tell their stories.
Right.
And so that's what I've been doing. So this is I started last February.
Mhm.
And so yeah, so that's what I've strived to do with that. And I have gotten some good feedback. I want to promote that a little bit more and encourage other Creoles to tell their stories. Some people are a little reluctant for different reasons, but
Right.
I allow them to tell as much as they want to about their
Mhm.
family. And if they don't want to talk about something, we won't talk about it.
I hear you. So again,
Yeah.
just going to Substack and looking up Lone Star Creoles, and
Lone
there
Star
you are.
Creoles on Substack. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, share
So
anything else coming up this year? I know we're just kicking it off and getting it going. And like you said, we were talking earlier, and you're coming out the gate slowly, as much as
I
as
have.
many of us are in January.
Yeah.
But some exciting things besides the endowment of the scholarship.
Well, the only other thing that I'll mention, and I'm not gonna look, I'm holding my cards a little close to my
I
heart
hear
on it,
you.
but I am working on something for children.
Okay.
And so that that's something that I'm going to be working on and seeing how far I can go with that. And I really want to promote reading in that and the
Mhm.
math part, which will be the recipes.
Mhm.
So each book would have a recipe. And so I'm just trying to figure out which platform is best to get it out there and do that. But right now I'm just writing the stories and working on that. But so that's been really fun. And
Wonderful.
I can play in the world of make believe a little bit.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, Sheri, thank you for joining me today. Let's make sure everyone knows how they can connect and support you.
Okay, they can find me on Instagram, Gifts from the Ancestors on Instagram. I did merge my website. It's effective February 1st. Everything will be located on giftsfromtheancestors.com.
Okay.
It's Gifts from the Ancestors on Facebook, and then on my LinkedIn, it's Cast Iron Skillet, but it's really under my name, Sheri L. Raleigh.
Okay.
And then and then the Substack, which is Lone Star Creoles. But I really do want to let the audience know too how much Creole heritage was helped by Cuisine Noir,
Oh,
because
wow.
Cherie, I want them to know everything that I have done since I sent in that apple pie recipe at the beginning of our relationship. You have supported through the Juneteenth celebration with magazines and all of that. And I just really appreciate that. And we need the voice of Cuisine Noire
Thank you.
in the food diaspora and and beyond. We really
Thank
do.
you. I really appreciate it. And I feel good, having supporters and friends like yourself that you've seen the journey that we've been on and trying to bring these stories to the forefront when they were, unseen, untold, and forgotten. And
Yes.
so, the work that we're doing, and especially in this day and age, is just so important to who we are as Black people throughout the diaspora. So thank you. I
Yes.
really appreciate that.
Yes, that's been that watching the journey and being a part of it in a small way has been a joy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Sheri, you and I will continue to talk, we'll continue to support, and wishing you just all the best in 2026.
Okay, and the same here. And call on me anytime.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Okay,
Talk to you
bye-bye.
soon. Bye bye.
Thanks.